In this Diablo 4 video, I'm going to be showing you my Overpowered Fury build. This is a Werebear Druid build that's aimed at level 50 plus and makes use of all the legendaries and uniques that we can gain at that level. This build is intended for World Tier 3 and to get you through Helltides and Creed Whispers content as well as Nightmare dungeons on your way to World Tier 4. If you saw my beginner Werebear Pulverizer build, then you know kind of how this build works. We're focused on overpowering Pulverize and other Werebear attacks in order to deal increased damage to enemies, as Overpower deals insane damage and allows you to one or two shot most enemies in the game. So let's sort of dive into how this build works. First, let's take a look at one unique item we're using for this build called Vasili's Prayer. This makes it so that all of your earth skills are now also considered Werebear skills, and they also fortify you each time you use them. Fortify in this game is a mechanic that makes it so that you take less damage when you have more Fortify than your max health. And Fortify also applies to your overpowered damage, so there is some synergy there. And being able to use Earth skills and remain in Werebear form is important, which I'll go into why that is shortly. But also this makes it so that your Earth skills now can take advantage of your Werebear synergies as well. For instance, if you have Werebear overpower damage, that is now going to apply to your Earth skills. This item also comes with insane stats. It has damage while shapeshifted, which will be constantly with this build. It has overpower damage as max life. Max life is good for this because it also affects overpower damage and it has resistance. And the other unique that's really good for this build is Insatiable Fury. This makes it so your default shape is Werebear. So when you're running around, you're actually a Werebear all the time unless you use a werewolf skill or use a skill that turns you into a human. You will remain in Werebear form, and there's a good reason why that's beneficial to this build. But it also gives you +2 ranks to all Werebear skills. And since your Earth skills are now considered Werebear skills as well, this will apply to those. So all your Werebear and Earth skills are going to gain +2, and that's huge. It also comes with physical damage, which is great overpower damage, damage reduction while fortified, you're fortified constantly, and armor while in Werebear form. All these are really good for a Werebear build. I do want to get into some legendary aspects too that are very, very important to this build, and the first one is Aspect of the Ursine Horror. This makes it so that your Pulverize skill is now actually also an Earth skill. So it's going to benefit from things that boost Earth skills or nature skills as well. And for instance, we have another legendary aspect that makes the critical damage of your Earth skills increased, which is really good. So to deal more damage, we also have one that makes it so that your Earth skills slow. So when you use it, you'll slow enemies. And then of course those enemies can take more damage when they're crowd controlled. So that's also beneficial. And the next one that's super important for this build is the Shockwave aspect. This makes it so that your Pulverize sends a Shockwave out forward in a line when you use it that deals up to 260% if you use it on a two-handed weapon damage of the original Pulverize damage. This is incredible damage. So you're going to hit even harder than you will if you're like right on top of enemies. So you can actually use this as a ranged attack and it'll deal up to 260% more damage. I actually have this on my weapon just because it's so damn powerful to get that extra, double 2 times the bonus on a two-handed weapon, and I highly recommend doing that. The next one is Aspect of the Trampled Earth. That makes it so that Trample now summons landslide pillars when you use it that deal increased damage. And it also makes it so that Trample is also classified as a nature magic skill on top of being a Werebear skill and an Earth skill. So anything that affects Earth skills and nature magic will now also affect Trample, and that's really, really important, and I'll get into why that is later. And then lastly, we have the Ballistic aspect. This makes it so that when you have Fortify, which is constantly when you're in Werebear form because you gain it so many different ways, your Earth skills gain +3 ranks. So you not only gain +2 ranks to Werebear skills from the Insatiable Fury unique item, but then you get, which applies also to Earth skills, but then you gain this that also applies to your Pulverize and your Trample because now they're classified as Earth skills. So you're basically getting +5 ranks to all your DPS skills. So moving along to the skills now that I've gone through that, first we have Maul. This is our basic standard attack that's going to help us generate spirit when we need it. We don't use it all the time. We have other ways of generating spirit with this build, but you need to stay in Werebear form with this build in order to gain overpower from provocation. When you remain in Werebear form for 20 seconds at max rank, you're going to gain a free overpower. And if you use like Earth Spike instead of Maul here, you would actually come out of Werebear form and then would break that time, even though it pauses for a little bit when you're out of Werebear form. You have a couple second leeway. If you spammed it a few times, you would actually reset your counter, so that's not good. So we have Maul here, and that's just our basic way of generating, damage. And then next we have Pulverize. Obviously, this overpowers every 12 seconds if you remain healthy during that time. That's over 80% health. So you can be aiming to do that, and you have pretty good damage reductions with this build, so that's not very hard to do. And you're going to get tons of damage from that because of the aspects that we have as well, the legendary aspects. So that's going to be your bread and butter moneymaker. So for my defensive skill, I've swapped out Debilitating Roar to Earth and Bulwark, and what I really like about this is it gives you a damage shield, and we actually have a legendary aspect that increases the duration of that Bulwark, so it lasts a lot longer, since 3 seconds is not very long. So this is really good at, you know, protecting yourself, and it also deals some damage, and because it can deal some damage because of the morph that we're using for it, it can also lucky hit, and I'll explain why that might be important in a little bit. That's a great way to mitigate damage when you're going into a hard pull. So our two other DPS skills here are Trample and Boulder, and what I really like about both of these skills is that they just have cooldowns. They don't require any spirit resources, so you're free to use your spirit on basically just Pulverize. So you can cast these anytime they're off cooldown, or if you have low spirit, you can cast them and still get them off. And Trample does devastating damage, particularly if you run enemies into something, so you should be trying to aim this into like a wall or into an object to deal the most possible damage to them. And it can also generate spirits, so that's really nice as well. And then Boulder is really good for like leading off a trash pull, particularly if you're in a dungeon going down a narrow corridor where enemies are grouped up, and knocks enemies backward. It has very high critical chance. We have increased critical damage with Earth Skills because of one of our passives. It also slows enemies, so then that'll increase your damage against crowd control or slowed enemies. And it's just a really good skill. It only has like a 10-second cooldown, so you can use it constantly. And then lastly, our ultimate skill is actually Petrify here. We don't have Grizzly range anymore because we don't need to. We're constantly Werebear form. Getting a little bit more damage reduction, and damage isn't that great. And what I really like about Petrify is it stuns everything around you for 4 seconds, and then you deal increased critical damage to it. But you also regenerate spirit every time you kill an enemy affected by Petrify. So this is really good to use when your spirit is very low in combat and you need to like catch up on your spirit, or if you just want to like lock everything down real quick before you just pulverize it into the dust. And it's really, really good with this build. So next we have Earth and Might as our key passive, and why this is really good for this build, besides like the flat damage that we got from Earthseen Strength earlier, is because when you use Earth skills, which effectively all of our skills are, Pulverize and Trample have been converted also to Earth skills because of legendary aspects, you have a 5% chance when you lucky hit to restore all your spirit or to make all of your next attacks for 5 seconds critical strikes. This is absolutely huge because this can regenerate your spirit instantly, and it's one of the reasons that you can use Trample and lead off with things like Trample and Boulder when you have low spirit, because sometimes it'll just fill it for you and then you can start pulverizing. And what's great too is this chance is increased if you critically strike or if the target is stunned, so it makes it more likely to happen in those cases, or stunned, immobilized, or knockback I should say. Spirit is really the limiting factor when using Pulverize over and over and over, and by, you know, just incidentally topping it up whenever you use any of your abilities, you can just keep pulverizing and it's absolutely deadly. So moving along to the spirit boons for this build, the two most important are Obsidian Slam and Masochistic, which means you need to spirit bond to the snake to get both of these. Obsidian Slam makes it so every 10 kills your next Earth skill will be overpowered. All of our skills that deal damage are Earth skills technically for this build, so that's really good. And then Masochistic makes it so critical strikes with your shapeshifting skills heal you. Again, all of your skills are also considered shapeshifting for this build, so every skill you use that critically strikes will heal you. This will keep your health topped up. These are both really, really important to have, because as you stay over 80% health, then you'll also overpower more. So talking a little bit about how we're set up for Paragon, I like the Spirit Glyph early on, and this is because it increases your critical strike damage with core skills, aka Pulverize, and we use Pulverize the most in this build, and it also increases the damage enemies take from you after you've critically struck them. So if you critically struck them and they didn't die, they're going to take increased damage from you on the next hit, which is really, really strong in my opinion. There are also other ones you can use, but for instance, Dominate, I don't think you can get enough intelligence early on in the game to actually be able to make this bonus work. But you can use other ones if you do not have this one yet, but I would consider using this one. It's not the only one, but it's a good choice. And then when it comes to the board we're aiming for Survival Instincts. We'll be choosing that board. It has a lot of benefits to Werebear passively around as well. But basically it makes it, while you're in Werebear form, you deal 1% increased damage up to 50% for every 1% difference in current life between you and the enemy. So this is absolutely deadly. As you weaken enemies, they're absolutely going to die. And because of all the other passives to Werebear damage and Overpower damage in this tree, it's the natural choice for this build. And then just talking a little bit about the passive skills that I pick for this build, I generally pick anything that's going to increase damage. In this case, we can use Earth Skills as well, or anything that affects nature, just because all our skills are technically Earth. But also Provocation, as I mentioned, is very important, because this makes it as you remain in Werebear form for 20 seconds, your next skill will Overpower. This should be constantly with this build, because you don't shape out of Werebear form ever. So you're going to be in this, and you never have to worry about going out of it. So this is going to keep ticking up, even when you're like running in between combat encounters, which is absolutely great. So that wraps up my Overpowered Fury build. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it seems like there's a lot of stuff you need to put this build together, and there is to make it perfected. But what's really interesting is the 2 unique drops that I got when I was farming. I got those same 2 uniques about 3 times each. I never got any other uniques at this level or world tier, so I'm not sure there are other uniques for druids unless I had some really crazy luck. And it actually didn't take me that long to get them, so if you think, oh man, it'll take me forever to get those uniques, it didn't take that long. I think I had both of them by about level 53, and you start doing the activities that can drop them around level 50, so it really wasn't that far, maybe about 4 or 5 hours, and I had both of those. I hope you guys enjoyed the build. If you have any other questions, let me know. We have more druid builds and other class builds coming, so you can stay tuned for those.